Hey guys, my name is Claire and I just graduated from Roanoke College. I'm here joined by my darling Hobbs, and today I thought I would talk to you about applying to graduate school. So I just graduated with a BS in psychology and a concentration in neuroscience. And I knew that I wanted to go to grad school to pursue psychology, so I thought that I would make this video to try and help people who are in the same kind of situation and just want to learn a little bit more. Okay, so first I feel like I should tell you a little bit about what I was looking for. To start it all off, when I was a junior in college, I started working at Hermitage Roanoke, which is an assisted living facility, and I just realized that I really like working with the elderly population. And I knew that I wanted to go into geropsychology, which is the psychology of geriatrics, older adults. I knew that I wanted to specialize in geropsychology, so I started looking at programs, and I specifically knew I wanted to work with a PI or principal investigator, lab coordinator, professor, someone who had been doing research with the older adult population. So the first part of looking at graduate schools is just making a list of where you could see yourself going. So this is going to come down to a lot of different things. Where do you want to be? First of all, do you even want to stay in the United States if you went to a US college? And if you did, do you want to do a terminal master's? Do you want to get a PhD? And then what kind of program are you looking at? Do you want to do clinical psychology? Do you want to do industrial organizational psychology? Do you want to do developmental psychology? And you kind of need to have an end goal in mind. Like, do you want to be a clinician? Do you want to be a professor? Do you want to be able to do a little bit of both? So you really need to know what programs are able to offer you and if that will help you attain your end goal. Another big thing that's really different with graduate school is you're going to be working very closely with one professor who is going to help you with your research. So you're going to need to look at this person very carefully and say to yourself, can I see myself working with them for 4 or 5, even 6 years? Because that's a long time. So if you just go to Google Scholar, you can type in their name, look at their recent publications, because even if the website says, oh, well, this individual does research on schizophrenia, it could be that they started off with a mentor who did research on schizophrenia and they published a few papers about that in the 1980s, but now their research has completely changed trajectory. So you want to make sure that what you are looking to do is current with what they're looking to do. So my biggest suggestion, something that I used, was APA's graduate study research search engine, and you did have to pay for it, but I genuinely could not find any other search tool that even slightly compared to this. So if you go to gradstudy.apa.org, you are able to look at all of the APA accredited programs in the United States, and you're able to look at it and filter by so many different things. You're able to see average GPA, GRE scores that were needed to get into the school. You can see what their funding is like, and I thought it was a fabulous source that I would highly recommend. So I just want to kind of create a timeline for what your application to graduate school is going to look like. Something that I really wish I had known was that I should have started sooner. And I think everyone would say that. But seriously, most of the PhD programs will require that your final application be submitted by December 1st. December 1st. Of the year before you would matriculate. And that is early. If you are in your senior year, December 1st is likely before you even get winter break. You've probably just come off of Thanksgiving break and you're getting overwhelmed with finals and everything like that. So you need to start looking into things early, and you need to start writing your personal statement early so you have time to get it sent to different professors and stuff like that. Okay, so continuing on with the timeline speak of this, I'm going to go ahead and tell you where I applied, where I got in, who rejected me. So I applied to a total of 8 schools. I applied to 5 PhD programs and 3 master's programs. So I'll start with where I applied first and where I got rejected first. So I applied to Washington University in St. Louis for their psychology PhD program. I applied December 1st, and this was the first rejection I got January 18th of 2022. I applied to the University of Alabama's clinical psychology PhD program December 1st, and I was rejected January 31st. I applied to Virginia Tech's Human Development PhD program on January 5th. Ooh, they gave you 5 more days, and I was rejected on February 15th. And their rejection email was special because they wanted to rub salt in the wound. And at the very end of their letter, they said, and I quote, "The main reason for this decision is, non-competitive," unquote. That's not helpful. That is not helpful to me. Like, I would understand if they were to elaborate on reasonings why I wasn't competitive. For example, I have not published anything. That makes sense if that is their reasoning for me being non-competitive. I do not have a master's degree, and maybe the majority of people applying for their PhD already have a master's. That would make sense, but they didn't say anything specific. It's fine, I'm fine. On December 1st, I applied to North Carolina State's Developmental Psychology PhD program. I was rejected April 22nd. That one, they kind of made you wait for that, but it gets worse. I applied to the University of Louisville's Clinical Psychology PhD on December 1st, and I was rejected on May 26th. May 26th. I graduated from Roanoke College on May 7th. I genuinely thought they were just ghosting me, which would have been rude considering I paid like $70 for their application fee or something like that. But I just accepted my fate that I hadn't gotten in because I hadn't heard back, and their response was definitely the most disappointing because they didn't even autofill in my name to say like, "Dear Claire, you didn't get in by." It literally just said, "Dear applicant." So those are the 5 PhD programs I applied for, and I got into none of them. So if you also didn't get into any PhD programs this year, I honestly, I'm laughing about this, but it was very upsetting when I first found out, especially the first 2. I cried when I found out because I thought I had like a little chance. Of course, they are super competitive programs, especially for clinical psychology, and I knew that the chances were low. But you are still allowed to feel upset about it and take time to acknowledge those feelings. So now we'll get on to the master's programs I applied to. I applied to Towson University's Masters of Arts in Clinical Psychology on January 8th. They sent me an email extending an invitation to interview on February 5th, and I ended up declining their offer to interview because I had already decided on a different school. And they specified in their email that they only extend like 40 interviews, and then they'll accept 15 students into the master's program. So I knew already that I wasn't gonna go there, so I wanted to open up a slot for some other student. But they eventually did send me a decision letter on March 10th. I also applied to Georgetown University's Master of Science in Aging and Health. I applied January 10th, and they accepted me on March 28th. The enrollment deadline was April 15th. So that was not a whole lot of time if you were to decide to go there to make your decision. I also want to say I ultimately declined their offer, but their tuition, Georgetown, DC, their tuition is, as a private university, is ridiculous. I think when I was looking at tuition plus like cost of living, it was going to be like $80,000 a year or something. And I was like, ugh, I can't do that. They did offer me a scholarship. And their presidential scholarship that they offered me for my academic achievements was $6,000. It's like they said, oh, here's $1. Like, that does not make a dent into their tuition. So, finally, you're saying, Claire, well, you said that you're going to grad school and you just listed 7 schools you're not going to. I saved the best for last, everybody. I applied to William and Mary's Master of Science in Psychological Sciences on January 10th, and their deadline wasn't until February 1st or something like that. And the professor that I had specifically applied to work with, he emailed me extending an interview on January 25th. I ended up interviewing a few days later, and I got an email from the program director on February 15th extending an offer, and that was kind of like I was accepted, but it was a preliminary offer that was contingent on the Dean of Graduate Studies approving. So I ended up accepting my seat at William and Mary. The cohort that's coming in is me and 8 other people. They had 150 applicants for this year, and it is a fully funded position, which is super rare for master's programs. Genuinely, that was the reason that I wanted to go for a PhD program, is because they're fully funded and I didn't want to have to shell out tens of thousands of dollars just to get a terminal master's degree. So I am super, super lucky in that regard. It is a 2-year-long program, and it is entirely research oriented. At the end, you will have at least 2 manuscripts that have been submitted for publication. And they cover all of the tuition fees, and then you are given a stipend in exchange for being a teaching assistant. So I think the stipend that I get is around $18,000. So it's certainly not as much as you would get in a PhD program. I feel grateful to be getting anything, but due to the cost of living in Williamsburg, it's not quite enough. It's definitely below the poverty level line, but something is better than nothing. So now that I've told you where I applied and where I got in, I figured you might want to know a little bit more about me, about my statistics, and I'm gonna go ahead and tell you. So this in no sense is me trying to brag, I'm just trying to be very transparent. I had an undergraduate GPA of 4.0. I ended up being one of the 5 valedictorians for the class of 2022 at Roanoke College. In regard to research experience, I started working in a developmental psychology lab when I was a sophomore in college, and then I ended up bouncing back and forth between 2 labs. I also worked in a neuroscience lab when I was at Roanoke, and I really enjoyed my experience in both of those. So I ended up having about 3 years of research experience. I presented a poster on my senior thesis at the University of Virginia's undergraduate psychology read conference. It was on Zoom, which was a little disappointing because, it wasn't the same as having those in-person interactions, but that was still cool. I was also involved a lot on campus. I was in the Roanoke College Choir for all 4 years. I was involved a lot with the theater, so I was in 4 different shows, and I helped work backstage on at least 2 others. So I was doing at least 1 production with them per year, if not more. I worked as a tour guide. I also worked as a freshman orientation group leader, which I honestly really enjoyed. And I also ended up doing some work for the Roanoke Review literary magazine on campus. And those are just some of the things that I spent time doing and really enjoyed. My work experience that was applicable to this whole process was my time at the nursing home. I found that that's what I drew a lot of my passion and inspiration from. Oh, GRE, I did not take it. All of the schools that I applied to did not ask for the GRE. I think this is a trend that we're seeing in higher education, even with undergraduate institutions, with the SAT, ACT. Because of COVID, that was an excuse to drop that requirement for a year, and now schools are just not asking for it, and I think that's great. It's been shown that the GRE is not a good indicator of a student's future success. It often is biased towards certain ethnicities, and it's just, I don't like it. I'll be honest, I bought a prep book and I started studying for the GRE, and then I was looking at the websites and I saw that almost everywhere I wanted to apply to didn't require it. So I said, forget this. Why would I spend X hundred numbers of dollars taking the test, more money to send the test scores if I don't have to? So I'm hopeful that all of the schools and universities are trending in that direction of dropping that requirement, because I will be reapplying for PhD programs. And I would like to not do that. So the other huge component of your application for graduate school that I have not touched on yet is your personal statement. This is your one opportunity to really talk to the graduate admissions, the professor that you want to work with, and it's your one chance to say, why this university, why this professor, why do you even want to go to graduate school? And what are you going to do after? So no pressure, but a lot of pressure. I ended up writing one personal statement that I sent and I had at least 7 people read it over. I had a few of my classmates who I trusted as good judgments of grammar. I had 2 of my psychology professors read it because, they themselves had gone through that process. I had a friend who, she herself is now in a PhD program and recently went through the process. And I had one person in the career services office look at it, and she was really nitpicky about wording and stuff like that. So start as early as you can and have everyone look at it. I'm not kidding, you should have at least 5 versions of it. And even if it's hard for you to accept criticism, for me, especially when it's something so personal like a written statement, you just need to be open to that feedback, or else it's not going to get better. My advisor looked at it and just was like, this whole paragraph, bad, don't include it. Because what I had done is I started listing out all of my skills that I thought I had acquired from lab, but those are all things that you can get on your CV. So why would you waste precious space trying to show someone all the skills you have when you've already written that in another space, in another document that they're going to look at anyway? So the personal statement, and then as I just mentioned, you have your CV. So usually for graduate school, at least for psychology, they're not going to ask for a resume. They're going to ask for your CV or curriculum vitae. Fancy Latin. It just means that you have more space to explain what labs you've been in, what conferences you've presented at, what specifically you want to research, any publications if you have those, and all of the awards that you've gotten. So it's a good space to have a little bit more time to explain all of those minute details. And then something else that I found, number 3, there were some schools that asked for a diversity statement. I would say about at least half the schools that I applied to wanted you to write a statement explaining how you will contribute to the diversity on campus and how your research could help aid diversity in the community. And this is something that I think is really important, and I'm glad that schools are incorporating it. And then number 4, big component, writing sample. This is something where I think this is a weakness in my application, because I don't think I chose appropriately and I didn't ask for help. So schools are going to want to see proof that you can put together some sort of manuscript. They're not going to want to take a gamble on you and give you all this funding if you can't publish anything. And at the point in time when I was applying in early December, I honestly didn't have anything that was perfect to turn in. And I should have just made a new writing sample, but I was lazy, and so I reused something that I had already done that was, in my opinion, not the best example of my work. So when I was making my submissions for the January deadlines, I had a literature review that I did in my adolescent development psychology class, and I think that was a much better example of what I had done. So that is something that, again, start looking at it right now during the summer. Think about what you want to show as a good example of your writing. All right, guys, I think that is all that I have to say right now on the subject. I have already babbled on long enough. If you have any other questions about something that you feel like I didn't cover, then feel free to ask them down below. Thanks for watching.